Welcome to the Reaching Higher podcast, where we discover the leader within. And today we have Tim Wessel, and my good friend Steve Livingway, Director of Youth, is here with us. But before we jump into the podcast, I just want to thank our partner, Michigan Institute of Athletics, and James Gray. The bottom line is without our partners, Reaching Higher doesn't exist. Without community and those coming alongside. So I do want to make this shameless plug to, if you're interested in partnering with us, go out to our website, check out Partner With Us, and join the cause. Join the cause. So here with Tim Wessel. And Tim, I'm going to introduce you as a keynote speaker. Obviously, you're a keynote for Reaching Higher, but I know you do that a lot in many other settings. Also, you're founder of Thrive Coaching and Consulting and primary coach for that. And just a fascinating journey. One that takes, a journey from professionally, you were a CPA at one of the large accounting firms and very successful, and then moved into being a youth pastor. And now you're coaching and consulting. So you think about that diverse leadership journey, and it's one of the most diverse journeys that I've been around, and that inspires me. So why don't you share with the audience a little bit more about that journey?
Yeah, well, the journey obviously started long before that. As I was a felon, and I was a messed up, broken, psychologically ill, addicted to drugs, young person who had spent years of abuse through my family, through outsiders. So, that journey kind of had its ups and downs.
Yeah.
Started very, very painfully, very messy, very destructive, of course. And then I was blessed to have somebody intervene in my life and give me a new path, and that new path started. And then I was blessed to have people in my life speaking into my life when all of my own voices and my own background would have sabotaged and destroyed me. So they held my hand. They got me through some really difficult first steps to what the life I have today, which is just a blessing. And so, that's kind of where it evolves to, I have to give this away. This isn't readily available to the world. There aren't a lot of people out there, loving people into wholeness, if you will.
Yeah.
And so, I just saw as I did that at work when I was a CPA. I've done that everywhere I've gone for years. And it's my strength, it's my gift, it's my passion. And coaching was a great way to step into the fullness of what that was, and to do that on a regular basis with as many people as I could.
Yeah.
Let's get back to your personal story. I mean, you just talked a little bit about why you do this, but I've seen it. I've seen the documentary Tim on Amazon. I think it's available. I've heard you in class. It's got to be at least 5 or 6 times you've come to one of my classes and spoken and shared at least part of your life story. A lot of people wouldn't be out there sharing, publicly and opening themselves up.
Yeah.
Why do you do this? Why do you feel that sharing your personal story is something you need to do?
Yeah, well, the first time I was asked to do it, I almost died of fear.
Yeah.
Because it was in front of a large crowd. I said yes before I thought about it, and then I went home to cry and beg my wife, it was at a church. I said, let's leave. I can't do this. I'm embarrassed. I'm ashamed, because I had so much fear and insecurity still as a younger person in public speaking and those kind of things. And then I did it, and, didn't die. Nobody threw eggs at me or tomatoes, but person after person, hearing some of the intimate details came out, some privately, some publicly, and just said, wow, I needed to hear that, and me too. And so I ended that, my discomfort versus the impact it has, which matters more. And, so I fought through the uncomfortableness because I saw the fruit. I saw the power of changed lives. Myself, counselors I struggle with, we talked about this earlier. Wasn't until I met people I trusted, that I thought understood me and had lived similar circumstances, that I felt safe to begin to heal. Nobody I knew had been conceived in rape and, dealt with suicide every day of their life and sexually abused for 10 years of their life. So it was like I was in this little island by myself, and until I met other people with similar stories, I didn't know there was hope. So for me, it's about that. I love people. I have to look back and say people did that for me. People were brave enough to open their mouth and share their story. And
Well, let me tell you, well, thank you. And every time after you've shared your story, a lot of times you have to leave after that and we continue with class. Every single time I have kids come up to me or share in class, hey, that was my life. That's what I went through, or that's some part of that. So I just want to say thank you, because you are inspiring a lot of people to be able to open up who probably felt they were the only one.
yeah, and that age group is my passion. You know, young people are stuck in the families they're stuck with. There's not a lot of control over your own life and what's happening in your own life. So to go into that environment and see these young people with so much potential and, you know, what they could become if they knew that, and what you guys do in Reaching Higher, and to just intervene a little bit with a story that says, yeah, you know, all of this, even God had a plan and there was more and there was opportunity, you know, that's for me. I mean, you see me cry every time I come because I'm just looking into their eyes going, oh, what a beautiful group of young people.
Yeah.
You know, they're world changers and they don't know it yet. And some of them are living through some things like I've lived through. And some, you know, we know there's a lot of varieties of brokenness, you know. Yeah. You can have overachieving, excellent parents who are successful, and just the pressure and the way you perceive that can break your self-talk. And, you know, there's a lot of different ways we're broken. But just to be honest, we're all broken. And you guys all do that in the class.
Yeah.
By the way, I cry every time, too. One thinking in my role as a father, where I might have wished I had done some things differently. One is thinking back to when I was a kid, and then looking into the room and all the other kids.
Yeah.
And, of course, looking at you, you know, as a friend. So I have all those things, but I'm talking too much, but it's very inspiring. I just want to thank you for doing that.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
Tim, I just want to bring up a point. You talked about the first time you spoke and shared your story, the fear and how it gripped you, and oh my goodness. And isn't it interesting, because fear is the opposite of living?
Right.
Because what I see in you right now is you're living life full. I mean, you're and you gave a couple of tidbits of your personal story. But what I found most inspirational about your story is how you've let go. Some people really caused some hurt in your life. And, you know, you have forgiven them.
Yeah,
and that's allowed you to now turn into this resilient leader who's out there serving, who's willing to leave, you know, a successful career and say, I'm going to go figure it out and I'm going to serve youth. And then to go off on your own and, okay, well, I'm going to go outside the shelter of this church and I'm going to start my own entrepreneur business. I'm just, and all around helping others. So could you share a little bit more your experience with letting go, and when you do that, some of the benefits you get out of that? I think it will really encourage some folks.
Yeah, for sure. And I remember, I think, Steve, the first time I met you and did a class, you were just staring at me with this, you know, look, and you mentioned that forgiveness part is what I'm most overwhelmed by. Like, how, right? And I hear that from kids all the time. How, someone said at South Lyon last time I was there, how do you forgive?
Right.
You know, I said, well, that's not a short conversation, but and I'm asked that more than any other question at the end of the story, because there were some pretty severe hurts by some people that should have done different in my life.
Yeah.
First of all, I was consumed with hate and anger and just some ugliness that came from that. You know, my response originally was just, nobody's ever going to hurt me again, and I'm going to hurt other people. And I became an ugly version of myself. And it was self-destructive. It was killing me, and it was poisoning me, and it was stealing from me everything that was good in the world.
The opposite of life, death.
It was. And, you know, and I have a personal faith that involves forgiveness. And that forgiveness that was given me, and believe me, I became a bad person, you know. It isn't everybody else's fault. There was a point where it was my fault and my sin and my brokenness, and I was hurting people, you know, and imagine that. Here's a person who was hurt so badly, and I'm doing the same thing to other people. Yeah. And, you know, so in that mix of receiving forgiveness and seeing other people and valuing them the way that I was being valued now, you know, I had to break through that and you know, went from pure hatred, honestly, to pure love. Some of those people that hurt me the worst, my mother, had a beautiful restoration with her, helped her heal. She was very sick, had her own issues, was able to step in and offer her grace and mercy and love and forgiveness and lead her toward healing. And then, you know, years later in my 40s, I meet my biological father. And had nothing but compassion and love in my heart for somebody that, was enemy number one at a point in my life, and ended up doing his funeral and, giving what I was as a pastor to their family and serving them. And I literally cried 3 days after that, because it was so clear that I lived in such anger and hatred toward one person, because I didn't want to blame my mom for everything. And then I stood there with not an ounce of, I want to hurt anybody in this room. I want to get even. Like, I'm going to give them the best I have. And like, that was awe-inspiring to me. Like, how did this happen? Look who I am and look where I'm at. So yeah, that's my main thing. I tell people all the time, you could run my kids over with your car. Please don't do it. But I so trust and believe in love and mercy and grace today, and what it does for me, that it's second nature. Like, first, of course, it was a battle. Like, I don't want to do this. This isn't fair to me. And
a process, too.
Yeah, you're going around in circles. Like, why do I have to forgive? And that isn't fair. And, once I got it, and it set me free, and it opened up my life in ways you can't explain. And, now I live in that place. And, I'm able to get there more quickly. Not perfectly, of course. People hurt us, but...
One of the leadership principles that's just not talked enough about, but Pete Carroll, the football coach for the Seattle Seahawks, will say this all the time, is he defines toughness as positivity. If you're a positive person, you're tough. You're tough as nails. And we don't hear that nearly enough, especially me coming out of the athletes world. That's the definition of toughness. And Mr. Peace, Kevin Sizwala, that we all know too, and was involved in reaching higher and is involved in reaching higher. I love what he says, hurt people hurt people. But what you're saying, and which is true, is there is hope. And that hope is when we actually let go, we also let go of the poison that's hurting us.
And healed people heal people is the backside of that. Hurt people.
Yeah.
What you just said, Troy, reminds me of a quote we actually use in Reaching Higher, and it says, I'm paraphrasing badly, but if you can go through all the stuff, all the hurt you've been through, and still be a kind, loving person, you are a champion. They use a different word in there. I can't repeat it.
Yeah.
But I mean, you're like, that's more amazing. I think it'd almost be easier to be bitter and angry than to be loving and kind after everything that you've gone through.
Well, and I can't really take credit for it as if I'm some good person who chose to do all this, in the sense that because it was so extreme and the hurt, the bitterness was so dark and ugly. Like, if I was living with, my mom yelled at me a little bit too much, or, some lighter story, I think that's harder to work through, because it's not this big monster that's going to consume you if you don't. I had no choice. If I didn't deal with this, I wouldn't be sitting here. So, it was a life and death decision. I'm either going to die in misery and pain and hate, or I'm going to figure this out and live.
Which almost happened.
Yeah, it did. It did, for
except
sure.
for that one day. Well, let me ask you, Tim. You've spoken in every class I've ever asked you, and that's just one. I'm sure every time I turn around, you're at another class or another group of people speaking about this. So maybe a tough question. What do you get out of it? And what do you think the students in our personal leadership class in Reaching Higher, what do you think, especially if they might have some even a touch of what you've been through, what do you think they get out of this?
Yeah, well, first of all, I get out of it is a reminder. I mean, the minute I get in there and look at their face and consider my life in high school, it's overwhelming. Like, sometimes I have to go in the bathroom and cry it out before I even walk in the room, because it's like, whoa. Like, I was dying inside in high school, and nobody knew how sick and broken I was. So that's the reminder, and a reminder of how far I've come and how blessed I am. And, I need that. I need to stay close to the bigger story. It keeps me humble. It keeps me grounded. It keeps me working hard on the things that I have today. But for the kids, it's clear to see, because, they're all smiling and, good little shiny, kids. And then we're done, and they're able to express their, I do the limiting belief session a lot. They're able to express, I don't feel good enough. I don't think I'm as good as my sibling. I don't think my parents will ever be proud of me. I think I'm ugly. I think I'm annoying, whatever. And so clearly they get to be honest with the fact that they have some limiting beliefs and that they're wrong, And then the class, the way you guys design this, is to attack that head on and get feedback from everybody. That is not true. Part of my personal therapy is looking into the eyes of other people. I would never call someone ugly or stupid, or I can't see negative in anybody. I see potential, I see power, I see beauty, I see all these things. And for a long time, I mean, I just wanted everybody to have that. I had a harder time giving it to myself. You know, everyone else is amazing. I'm not. And I learned to change that voice and say, if it's true that everybody is absolutely beautiful and amazing and perfect and created exactly how they were supposed to be created, then it's true about me too.
Wow, that's huge.
And so that whole process just rekindles all that, reminds me, and, you know, watching the kids respond and knowing that some of them never have. You know, we've had kids respond very powerfully with some deeper hurts and for the first time ever asked for help from the counselors and, you know, step forward into some healing. And for that to happen in high school, instead of many people I see today are adults for the first time trying to address those things after it festered and hurt them for years. So I love to watch kids respond and heal and open up and communicate. One
of the things I see, it sounds so simple, but just this realization of I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
I'm not alone. Right. Someone else out there might understand a little bit of how I feel. I feel that is empowering. I think it's the first step of them wanting to maybe heal or work towards getting better.
For sure. And to see it be the captain of the football team, the valedictorian,
the principal,
the superstars, and then the kid who, you know, maybe had a broken home and some messier life stuff, and they're the same.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, they look at each other and to see them become friends and to see them value each other. One of the things I hear sometimes is people will say, I never understood or even thought about what the bully is going through. You know, because I share that I was an ugly, mean, cruel person in high school after I decided no one's going to hurt me anymore.
You were the bully.
Yeah, I was. I went from being bullied to be the bully. And just to see them even consider their student, their fellow student as a human being with their own hurts and brokenness like that, I think we all need more of that. You know, just to see people through, you know, a different lens than, oh, you're just a bad, horrible person. You know, imagine what could happen if we all saw each other through a lens of everyone's value and
just love.
Yeah. Amen. That's a powerful word. Yes, it is.
So Tim, you know, you talked about the inner voice and you had to change that. That was part of you leading yourself, right? And in my mind, taking risks and doing all this. So I'll give the audience another title that I left out originally, but you're also the director of RAIL, Recovery Advocates in Livingston.
Yes.
And so Tim has also stepped into that, and we did a little experiment, right? You stepped into teaching in Reaching Higher, along with Greg Long, who we done a podcast on, his top 3% life coach. But this is to a group that was in recovery at some stage from a level of addiction. And so I'm just going to kind of leave that to that, but share a little bit more your experience and why, you know, the connection that you saw there. What did you see in those participants?
Yeah, so I've been in recovery 35 years, celebrated 31 years married this week. Celebrated that going to an AA meeting, just reflecting on if I hadn't found sobriety, that part of my life never would have become what it is today. But I work a lot in recovery. Again, reaching back to a population and people that had similar struggles and knowing there's hope and knowing there's solutions. RAIL came out of a necessity. It's an RCO, it's a recovery community organization who connects all of the different resources together to make an impact on people in recovery. My dream job, right? To be able to make an impact and use federal money, grants, and things to do that. And it's time consuming, but the impact's great. And doing this as often as I have with you guys, knowing how powerful the program is, knowing all the students I see in my office in counseling at Thrive, and we got to do something for these kids. We got to do something for these kids. It's they come in broken, families broken, and so knowing the impact that makes, I said, let's look at doing this outside. So we did that experiment. I found a bunch of friends, just put the message out, hey, I want to do this leadership class for some folks that are in recovery. I think we had 15 people.
Yep.
Got there quickly. These people, long-term recovery, some shorter term, most of them long-term recovery. And it was powerful, life-changing, because what happens in the recovery world is you survive day by day. Like, I have to get high, I have to get money, I have to make it through this day, I have to figure out how to make it through.
Yeah.
Then you find sobriety and you take away all those chemicals that you're masking underlying issues and problems, and you begin to heal. But then they teach you to walk one day at a time, which is healthy, right? I'm going to get through today, and people need to do that. But sometimes they stay stuck in that limited world of, okay, my thing is to be sober today. That's what I have to hope for and dream for. And their dream isn't to become a successful CPA. I mean, I went from felon to a six-figure CPA, and I couldn't have told you that could happen. And so, I want all my friends. I want people to know. And so we did it and watched people. People were confessing they're going to be mayor of Howell, great, big, powerful dreams. And I looked in the room and said, everyone in this room could achieve everything they just mentioned. Yeah. So, it was a great experience, a great response. And then, of course, we began to talk about making it wider available for people with those backgrounds. Yeah. And in Rail, we do with a lot of people who are in recovery, but there really isn't a lot of goal setting and training on those kind of how do you, they didn't get it as a kid and it wasn't in their family. Sometimes their families are quite chaotic, and then you lose it because you're just living in this chaos. So it's a powerful piece for long-term success and recovery is to give people a vision. Like I said before about coaching and counseling.
Excuse me.
You're running toward a dream. When it became, I had a dream life out in front of me that I could get a lot of energy and my wind in my sails. But when I was just trying not to be this loser, broken person I used to be, that energy was exhausting. So, to give that to people and give them that forward-looking, goal-setting dream life is why we did it.
Yeah. And so that was about 9 months ago, I believe, that you had the class. Some of these individuals you coach. So what do you see now as a result of that? Do you see that momentum? Do you see that spark that happened? Do you see a resolve in them continuing?
Yeah, a lot of them, some were silly little goals. Some of them, I've been procrastinating, cleaning up my house and getting my room organized or whatever, and they did it. And that is a big deal, though. Those first steps when you're just stuck in procrastination and limiting beliefs, whatever it is in your way, and you do that. Now I'm watching this person I'm talking about, progress all the way through some very big goals and some very powerful changes that were sparked in that class. And I do this anyway, but there was just momentum in other people sitting together in the group dynamic that happens when you hear other people, and again, you're cheering them on, and then you're like, why am I not cheering myself on? So that was a big part of it. So quite a few of them in there made some drastic changes and are continuing forward, and
Well, let me do this before I know you're going to ask the next question, Steve. But I talked about and led this podcast off with partner. And part of that partnering could be mentoring at Reaching Higher, could be instructing. What did it do for you? What did it do for you to actually teach the class?
Yeah, for me, because I love people and I love everybody in that room, and I knew most of them by a first name basis. For me, it was just, labor of love. So for me, it was just inspiring. It was encouraging to watch my friends grow and to move. Of course, all of the principles of Reaching Higher are constantly, we're always growing and teaching ourselves. So, I might know it yesterday, but I need to hear it again tomorrow. So every time I go through it, there's a growth, there's a reminder, there's a resharpening that happens. So, very, very powerful. And the same reminder, what are my dreams and goals? Our mentors that came in to mentor that class, first thought is, they're addict people and I'm going to mentor. They sat back and watched, because addicts are open, they're vulnerable, they're honest, and they get there quick. They wouldn't be sober if they hadn't done that. So they start off, running hard, where some of the classes, there's a momentum and a trust that has to build. There was a lot of trust in the room. We're all the same, let's go. And the mentors were like, wow. Their feedback at the end, like, that changed my life. I'm rethinking everything because you inspired me. So, just huge inspiration and powerful
I think that's
reminders.
Awesome. I like that. You're in recovery, now what? You still have goals, you still have dreams, right? Let's talk about those. Troy mentioned, and you've mentioned this idea of coaching. And so I got a question. We talked about it a little earlier. I hear of therapy, counseling, doctors. How is coaching maybe different from therapy or counseling?
Yeah, coaching, first of all, the term coaching is safer for a lot of people. just the psychological feel of walking into somebody's office. So when they're going to be coached, especially as men. Man, we had
We've
football
all had a
coaches.
coach,
Yeah,
right.
so coach was a fond
Right.
memory of somebody that made a difference in our life. So coaching is very much just pulling out their dreams, pulling out their best, helping them find that, see that, know that, and then creating goals, creating vision, and creating accountability to move forward into that space. As I said earlier, the big difference between counseling was like, oh, for me, let's talk about the abuse. Let's look at that. And I would watch counselors look at me like in horror. Oh my gosh, when they heard my story. Well, that just set me to a place that wasn't good. Like, you're overwhelmed. You think I'm a project. You think I'm all messed up. I saw it on your face. So I had a hard time with that, and it was difficult for me. I would leave thinking, I just talked about the abuse. I just relived some stuff. Now, that's not what traditional counseling is. That isn't what traditional therapy is. It's part of it. And but for me, it's more about chasing a dream, creating a dream, running toward a future that is good and amazing and wonderful, versus the energy, as I said earlier, running from the nightmare of what was, and staying too focused on that part of the story. So for me, I'm trying to, I tell them, we're going to run hard at a better life, and we're going to create that, and we're going to see that, and I don't blow smoke up people's bottoms, right? It's realistic. It's realistic for where we're at. But while we're doing that, sometimes I can't, or I'm afraid, comes up. Then we go to that space. Where does that come from? And you can look back over lives and see this happened, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened. Well, of course you think that, but is it true? And we try to bring truth, and we try to set that part free so they can keep running. It's a lot different than just focusing over here and trying to make
mindset, isn't it?
It is a different mindset, yeah. Yeah, and I think they're all important. I have clients that go to traditional therapists and counselors and psychiatrists for different parts of their journey. My part is my part. Now, the best compliment ever is when people have been to every kind of counselor, doctor, person, and they come to me discouraged and overwhelmed and nothing works, and, what are you going to do? And we have fruit, and we have transformation, and, I get to see that I'm adding a lot of value that the other way didn't work for this
Maybe
person.
they're tired of talking about all the problems and all the issues and all the bad stuff, and they're ready to, like you said, dream and think forward.
Yeah. Sometimes. There's if I can share a quick biblical story, I use it a lot because I'm a Christian. And so sometimes, my clients are faith people. But there was a woman in the Bible who had an issue of blood, which meant she had a menstrual bleeding that couldn't stop. In those days, culturally, she was unclean. She wasn't allowed to go out in public. She wasn't allowed to do a lot of things. So imagine, she's stuck at home, depressed, alone. Said she spent everything she had seeking everyone she could to get help, and she became sicker than she was before. 12 years of, I can't get better, I can't get better. And then Jesus came to town, and she heard there was a healer, and she heard there was this Messiah. She snuck out into the crowd and touched his garment, and he said, "Who touched me?" And his disciples were like, "Everybody's touching you. What are you talking about?" He goes, "No, somebody touched me." And he turned around, and she was shaking, afraid. "Oh my gosh, I touched him." And he said, your faith has made you well. So, I use that story a lot because people have been sick so long. I was that person. I have been this person since I've been born. And so you get discouraged and you get hopeless. And so, I hope to inspire that, there is hope. If they can grab a hold of hope and they can have the faith that they can change, like, anything can happen. So often that's the way it is. They've come to me at the end of all the ropes and giving up. And I'm like, I'm not giving up on you.
Just your example.
Yeah, that helps
Just
a
your
lot.
example.
For sure.
It gives some hope of, wow, he's done this.
Right.
Maybe it's possible for me.
Right, for sure.
I don't know if you guys know, but the word coach is a derivative. It came from stagecoach. When you think about an old stagecoach,
didn't know that.
and what does a stagecoach do? It helps people get from point A to point B.
Right.
And so it's getting them wherever they're at and moving them forward to where they're going. So it's something that always resonated with me as a basketball coach. In other words, it's not my journey.
Right.
It's the individuals and what do they want and how do I help them get to where they want to go.
Yeah.
And that's what I hear out of you, Tim. So let me ask you this. You have a successful coaching business and consulting business. You're helping people. And right now we're probably reaching some people that are considering and might need some help. So, what would that look like if a youth or even an adult to be coached by Tim Wessel through your organization?
Yeah. So first thing I do is invite them to come in and meet me. I don't want to coach anybody that doesn't believe in me, doesn't trust me, doesn't think I'm a fit. And I do a lot of teenagers. Teenagers don't trust adults, right? Oh, you got another parent going to tell me what to do. You can tell me I'm bad. Their voices they hear often is you're bad, especially by the time they get to me. They've been failing and they're hearing their parents discipline them. So I just create a warmth and a friendship, and I'm honest. Like, I'm sorry, this is a labor of love. If you're going to work with me, I'm going to pour my life into you, and I'm going to help you get somewhere, and I'm going to pray for you and dream about you and root for you till the day you die.
Right.
I'm not a traditional counselor. Don't call me on Friday. I told the kid yesterday, you call me anytime, day or night, if you're struggling with suicidal thoughts or discouragement, or your parents are coming at you and you don't know how to process. I will pick up the phone and I'll hold your hand. So I start with a sit down. I have probably, I'd say 98, 99% rate of success when a kid comes in or an adult comes in and we meet face to face, that they believe I have something to offer and that I'm going to give it to them. And I don't charge anything for that consultation, because sometimes I can give them another resource that point them in another direction, or
they might need counseling. They might need to go backwards, right?
Yeah. So, I'm just like, that's just a sit down. The fascination of people and stories and meeting people is worth it to me. I do a lot of that. Yesterday I cleared some pretty important parts of my day to meet a kid that, was in trouble, and his family. And, but to see him go from staring at the floor to looking me in the eyes, and then to have his family call back later and said, he really wants to come and see you. That's everything for me. So, we do some assessment things in the beginning, get to know them. I have sat with students and talked Dungeons and Dragons and their favorite anime, and just let them be who they are and get to feel and sense and know them in a way that a lot of time parents can't or don't. Again, it's all about trust. And I've had students use Dungeons and Dragons campaigns to communicate their life and their brokenness and their struggles, the characters and the roles they play, and just fascinating that they couldn't sit there and look me in the eyes and say, I'm abused and this is happening and this is how I feel. But in developing characters in this game, it was everything about how they feel, So it's pretty powerful and interesting to watch. But I usually I do like a 10 package deal, like where we say we're going to meet 10 times, because that commits us to some foundation of growth. The greatest thing ever with young people is mom and dad are paying because kid can't afford to get help, and the kid starts, and then later maybe the parents can't afford it. Over the kid's like, hey, I'm going to take part of my money from my job because I want to keep seeing him. Like, to me, that's a dream, that they want now to invest in themselves, and they've felt the worth and the value and the change, and they want to keep going, and they don't want to lose it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And that's such an interesting point. I mean, that is when we think about invest in ourselves. We always talk about investing money in a bank. We talk about investing it here, there. But we sometimes discount the most significant investment, and that's into ourselves.
Right.
And that's what I love being a part of Reaching Higher, is because that's what we're helping students do. That's what we're helping adults do.
Right.
That's the best investment anyone can make, is in themselves. And that's powerful testament that you have youth that will actually go to that point. It's also one of the reasons why we are becoming convicted at Reaching Higher and to launch a coaching platform too, because yes, they have success over those 8 weeks and it's time tested and they develop habits and all of that. But as we know, life is so tough, it'll throw you a gut punch.
Right.
And then you got to remember, and you got to get back into those types of things. So that's something that we're exploring, and it's going to happen. It's just a matter of timing. But we want it to be of excellence, just like our programs of excellence. So we don't want to rush and just go and do something at this point. So,
and I have clients for years that come in and we're really intense and we work really hard and we have the 10-week program, and then they just come in for checkups or tweaks or, hey, this came back up. That is a blessing to be in their life in the long run, and just a place they can land and go, okay, we talked through all this, I conquered all this. It creeps back in. Life comes back at us. Life changes, new struggles. But we don't need to meet every week at that point. We can meet once a month. We can meet once a year. But, to look at my records lately and realize how many people I've had for years, it's pretty exciting. And to see the growth. Sometimes that's my job. Say, do you realize what you were saying when you walked in the first day? I got quotes. I wrote them down. Do you realize what you're saying today? Do you, because you can't see your own growth, right? We struggle to affirm ourselves. We struggle to see our change. That's one of my things, too, is to make sure they're celebrating and seeing. And when you sit there and go, I'm so amazed by you. I'm so impressed. They're like, what? They don't see it. And so that's a lot of the coaching, too, is just cheering on the successes and letting them see, because we have a hard time telling ourselves we succeeded. I don't know what that is, but we do.
Tim, if you could see your face and expression, like your passion comes out when you're talking about the kids and the people you're coaching. Mm-hmm. You said earlier, like you'll tell a kid, I'll fight for you.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking, yeah, a coach. I could see a coach fighting for me, maybe not my therapist.
Right.
But I can see my coach out there fighting for me. It's just, if I was meeting with you, I would sign up with you. I just see that passion coming through very strong.
Well, the first session's free, Steve. So come on by.
I could probably use it.
The other thing I just want to mention before we close this podcast is coaching. Everyone attributes that, well, that's a sports thing. And it's really not. It's not at all. It's where coaching really started was in sports. Right. And I don't know if you guys knew this, but it was some college universities and, they had sports programs. And all of a sudden, this team got a coach and that team didn't have a coach. They were player-led. It was all of that. Mm-hmm. Guess who's winning? The coach-led teams.
Sure.
Guess what the other teams did? They got a coach. So I'm just saying this in regards to there's a little bit of a stigma, and I have an executive coach. I have a coach that coaches me twice a month. Yep. And it is the best investment I've made, just because I like to say this too. The farthest distance in the world is between knowing and doing. Mm-hmm. And they will challenge me and help take some of those blinders off and hold me accountable, but yet encourage me to move forward. And that's the coach that I see you are. And Tim, I just appreciate you. I appreciate you being on this podcast. I appreciate you being one of our keynote speakers, that you just volunteer and come and speak in our schools. And I hope that we can come alongside of you and what you're doing with Rail and everything else and just continue to make an impact in lives, an impact in our future, and impact in the world. So thank you for being on today.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I say it all the time when I'm sitting in the class, who inspired you today? I always go to the mentors and the instructors, because they take time out of their busy lives to go sit in a high school with a bunch of kids that aren't theirs and add value and add worth and change their lives. And, again, another moment, I usually cry because I'm like, what if some adult had stepped into my life at the right moment? So I really appreciate Reaching Higher. It inspires me. It gives me hope for our schools and what's going on in our schools, which is messy and different, and they're struggling, but Reaching Higher's there, and we're growing, and they're adding more programs. So thank you for showing up for our kids and our community.
Well, thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Tim.
Appreciate it.